Hey guys, Steve with Revive, and I just want to point out I had a really good week this week. My overall total increased by around 10 kilograms, so I look good for my meat. And again, as you can see, I've written down the weight I've used and kind of some feelings and comments about the lift at the time. Again, just to kind of make you think about that. I think it's good to keep that sort of accountability for yourself, and also you can pick out when things felt good, if there was any links to kind of nutrition, how you slept, how you felt the day before. All those sort of things can really help you when you're kind of getting into those more advanced stages of lifting, when to squeeze out some extra reps or weight on the bar to actually progressive overload, the thing we're all after, gets harder and harder. You need to kind of know when things are good, why were they good, what worked for you well. So that's just a note on that. So at the moment, things are going pretty well. Unfortunately, I've come down with a bit of a cold recently, but this last week went really well, and I didn't really have many complaints. Confidence is pretty high with the squat and bench press. Deadlifts, confidence is getting there. Had a pretty good lift, that will come up later. But I just want to touch on something that you'll see. This video is very similar in layout to my last video, and that's the fact I have days that I focus on particular lifts, and there's some lifts I lift more frequently and some lifts I don't lift as frequently. So obviously this is me focusing on the squat, bench press and deadlift, and essentially they're three lifts that I like to progress on. They're three lifts I enjoy. They're three lifts that my coach has coached me in, and I am specific to those lifts because I want to do powerlifting. But even before I wanted to get into powerlifting, I was focusing on progressing with these three lifts. I do recommend, and I do for all my clients, pick at least three lifts that they look to progress on, and I really focus on tracking the volume, tracking the estimated 1 rep maxes for these lifts, and I recommend you do the same. I'd recommend you pick three lifts, preferably three different kind of lifts that emphasize different areas of your physique. Like the squat emphasizes quads, deadlift is back strength and hamstring strength, glute strength. Obviously they all mix a little bit, and bench press is very much so your chest, shoulders and triceps, a very upper body based lift. So I recommend you pick at least three lifts to kind of focus on, make sure you're progressing on, and then by choosing these three lifts, you can program in and make sure all your accessory work kind of around the lifts, because you get too gung-ho, focusing on too many things, making sure everything's progressing. As long as these three lifts that you've chosen are progressing, then you're doing great. And they don't have to be the squat, the bench press, the deadlift. They could be the squat, the bench press, the deadlift. They don't have to necessarily be a conventional deadlift. Olympic barbell squat, it could be a front squat, it could be a close grip bench press, it could be an incline bench press with dumbbells. It just needs to be something that you can pick and progress with. So here was my deadlift that had been feeling a bit off recently, so I picked a little bit of a more conservative load here. It was 190, so I was happy with kind of how my form was looking with this. I made sure to kind of attack the bar with some intent. That's why I showed that double clip there. I think it's important that you attack the bar a little bit when you're doing a deadlift, because when you're squatting or benching, with those two movements you lift the bar out the rack and you kind of get a feel for it initially, whereas with the deadlift it's on the ground, so you have to go and actually lift it before you kind of get a feel for it. So it's good to kind of attack it with some intent, take the slack out the bar and then go for it. So that's just my little kind of tip for deadlifting. So as I was saying, you want to pick those three lifts that you're going to make sure you're progressing with. You're making sure kind of you're assessing, you're maybe looking at kind of how much total volume you're doing, so that's reps times weight. You're looking at your intensity, and you're periodizing those three lifts, because that's what is going to actually progress you. So pick three lifts, make sure they're progressing, make sure you kind of, when they don't progress, you're switching things up, make sure your accessory work is kind of building you towards building those three lifts, making sure those are progressing. It's just a bit of a tip there. And then if you're wanting one of those lifts to particularly come up, you've got a particular weak point, maybe your chest is weak like me, and you want your bench press to improve, then increase the frequency. When we lift with a certain muscle group, in general, protein synthesis is upregulated for 48 hours. So it makes sense to try and use every muscle group every 48 hours. So for most people that becomes workable with 2 sessions a week per muscle group. So as you can see, I obviously train my legs at least twice a week, and I train my upper body at least twice a week. Certain lifts also can be programmed in more often than others. This will depend on the person, it will depend on the lift, but for something like a deadlift that is very, very intense, most people can only deal with 1 session a week. If you're a bit newer to the deadlift, you're not using such heavy loads, then you might be able to get away with more than once, maybe twice. But if you're an advanced lifter, you probably don't want to be lifting such a massive load, because it will take its toll on your body, and kind of rather than progressing because your frequency is quite high, it'll actually regress because it's just taking too much out of you. Whereas things like the squat, especially if it's a high bar squat, you can recover pretty quickly from. And the bench press, again, it doesn't seem to take such demand on your body, especially neuromuscularly and also just physically. The deadlift takes the most effort to actually lift that weight off the floor, sorry. And when you're thinking about muscles used, the deadlift uses the most. Hey guys, sorry, so my recording kind of cut out me there. So I was saying, when you're thinking about muscles used, the deadlift uses the most musculature out of the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. So you have to think that's going to take its toll on your body, and also neuromuscularly, it takes a lot more effort to kind of think about lifting that bar off the ground. It takes a lot of demand on your total body, so you can't necessarily program it in as often, especially as your loads are increasing. It gets more and more difficult. But I do think frequency is a great way to increase your strength in a lift, and it's also a great way to kind of get the most muscle gains possible, especially if you've got your sleep nailed, you've got your nutrition nailed, you're eating enough, you're eating a calorie surplus, you're getting 6 to 8 hours sleep a night, enough for you. Then you can look into things further like supplementation. Are you taking creatine? Are you getting enough daily? Are you getting beta-alanine? Are you getting enough of that daily? Things like that can help. It doesn't mean everything, but it can help push you towards getting more. But when you are thinking about increasing the number of times that you do a certain lift, really think about kind of, don't do it all at once. Don't start benching going from 1 times a week to 4 times a week. Really scale it up nice and slowly. So if you're doing it once a week, go to 2, and then if you feel like 2's not enough, maybe go to 3. But then you can think about your assistance work. You're doing things like, I'm doing a spoto press here. You might do a pause bench press or a pause squat to help your squat. Or is your assistance work set up to benefit your main lifts that you're trying to progress and overload on? So a few things to think about. Hope that's been insightful. Cheers guys, and revive stronger.